Welcome, book talk enthusiasts, to another exciting episode of Dragons and Spaceships, where we shine a spotlight on all the sci-fi and fantasy books that are taking the platform by a storm. I'm your host, Brandi, and today we have a very special episode for you. Today, we are stepping into a whimsical and mysterious tale called Olaf and Essex by Patti Calkosz. But you will also be able to hear the interview that I did with Patti about this book. I loved getting to know Patti and to hear her story and her process of how the story came to be. But before we dive into this book, let's take a look at the Realm and Galactic rankings of trending books this week. The top 3 trending books in fantasy this week are Wisteria by Adeline Grace, Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright, The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean, and the top 3 for sci-fi are The Mercy of the Gods by Neil Asher, Hum by Josh Mullerman, and She Who Knows by Tade Thompson. Okay, back to our book, Olaf and Essex. This is an amazing story that blends fantasy, adventure, and heart, all set in magical and landscape of Central Park. Imagine Central Park at night, not just as a city landmark, but as a living, breathing world where animals talk, trees offer wisdom, and magic lingers in the air. An environment that is both familiar and entirely fantastical. Olaf, a big-hearted bear, and his best friend Essex, a curious red fox, lead us on an unexpected adventure where they stumble upon a human baby abandoned by 2 witches. From the very first chapter, we are thrown into a scenario that feels both whimsical and dangerous. The witches, Harvey and Mabel, plan to use the baby as a bargaining chip, but things go awry when the baby displays magical abilities of its own. What follows is a heartwarming tale of unlikely guardianship as Olaf and Essex take the baby under their care, facing dangers, moral dilemmas, and the ever-present threat of the witches returning. Now, chapter 6 is where the stakes truly rise. Olaf, driven by his protective instincts, confronts the witches, and we see how deeply he's bonded with the baby. When the witch's spell backfires, it's not just a moment of magical chaos, it's a turning point. The witches flee, and Olaf, against all odds, decides to take the baby back to his cave. The chapter beautifully captures the theme of the unexpected heroes. Olaf isn't just a bear, he becomes a protector, a parent, and a character we can all root for. But what makes Olaf and Essex so special? It's the way the story balances humor, heart, and a touch of darkness. If you're a fan of Ice Age, you'll recognize a dynamic of unlikely characters facing all the odds. But unlike the prehistoric setting of Ice Age, this story is steeped in fantasy, witches, talking animals, and trees that whisper secrets. And let's not forget the underlying message. Sometimes those we least expect rise to the occasion, and sometimes magic isn't about spells and wands, but about love, care, and the bonds we form with others. Now, please enjoy the interview that I was able to do with Patti and hear her thought process behind the story and how Olaf and Essex came to be. Welcome, Patti, to Dragons and Spaceships. I'm very excited to meet you and talk about your new book, Olaf and Essex. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well, Brandi. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I'm very excited. So today we have some questions to get to know you and to get to know your book. Let's just dive right in. So do you want to tell us who you are and how you got into writing, like your past, future, and present?
My name is Patti Calkosz, and as a child, I was always interested in doing creative things. I enjoyed the lessons in grade school, drawing and writing little things. But I also had a lot of fear around telling stories. In 3rd grade, we wrote skits to put on in front of the school, and I wrote a skit that had just one funny line, but the whole audience laughed, and it was great, but I was also getting a lot of messages from mainly my parents and other people that it wasn't safe to put myself out there or to be seen. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't do much again in college. A friend of mine, he was speaking about his creative writing classes, and it sparked something inside me. But my creativity was pretty rusty, and I didn't get into the class, and so I thought that meant I wasn't a good writer. And it wasn't until I was in the Coast Guard and I was watching TV in the break room after duty one day, and I suddenly had this realization that I didn't want to just watch other people being creative, that I wanted to be creative. Over the years, I tried many things, screenwriting, songwriting, cartoons. But it wasn't until I started writing fanfic about 7 years ago that I actually found my authentic prose voice and discovered that I actually was a good writer.
That's amazing. How fun. I love that you had this like creative path that you went on and you found what works for you and what you love. That's really cool.
It took a long time to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. What inspired you to write Olaf and Essex?
I received this mental image of a fox and bear standing with a young girl in a tundra. And the girl seemed to be about 13, which I felt would be young adult, which I felt would mean writing about love relationships. And I was kind of burned out on that after 2.5 years of fanfic. So I decided to make the baby a child. And then I got this mental image of a bear's arm reaching through a window, stealing a baby from a crib. So I had to figure out the bear's motivation and also how to get the audience, the readers, to root for him instead of judging him.
Without giving any spoilers, can you give us like a brief synopsis of what the plot of this book is?
So late at night in New York Central Park, a bear named Olaf accidentally scares away 2 witches, Mabel and Harvey. They leave behind a baby. The baby they'd kidnapped to try to force the baby's father, the NYPD's chief magic detector, to stop harassing the magical community. Olaf and his best friend Essex, Fox, they search for the presumed parents and witness Mabel, who's angry at Harvey for leaving the baby behind, turn him into a frog. And they're terrified. They flee. They find out through a trio of wise trees in the park that these are the kidnappers. They're not the parents. So Olaf and Essex, with the help of their furry friends and a pair of good witches, sisters who live in the park, they search for the baby's mother while trying to evade Mabel and the baby's own father, the chief magic detector.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I have been loving looking into this book, and it kind of gives like a little bit of Ice Age vibes.
I did think of that. Yeah. The trio of animals with the young child.
And it like kind of has some heartwarming, all of a sudden they're now like parenting, they're now like looking after a child. And probably I viewed that because I have children of my own and we watch Ice Age constantly. But I was like, oh, this is kind of like Ice Age. And it's a lot of fun. I love it. But very different, but just, that's very cool.
I did think of Ice Age as a possible comp when I was querying. Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's talk about the character development. So Olaf the bear is portrayed with very human-like emotions and behaviors. What inspired you to give a bear such complex characteristics, and how did you balance his animal instincts with human traits?
Well, I think I've watched so many anime films over the years that anthropomorphize not only animals, but like things like robots, that it never occurred to me not to make him a complex being.
Yeah.
I did read up on foxes and bears and other animals too, and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos to get a sense of how they would behave in the wild. And also, there's so much encroachment now of human beings into previously only animal territory that I felt it was kind of reading about things like that. I went to the zoo in Central Park where there was a bear in this, large enclosure, but it feels to me like a lonely bear.
Yeah.
And I read that she was put there because I forget which national park, but they were afraid that with her coming into contact with humans, she would get shot. So for her protection, they put her in the zoo. And she just looked to me so lonely there, and made me think a lot about, animals and humans and interacting and all that. And so I felt it was very easy for me to get into the animal mindset when I was writing.
That's amazing. You really did your research. You went to the zoo and everything. I love that. Oh my gosh. Did you spend a lot of time in Central Park?
I did. Actually, when I began writing, pretty soon the pandemic started, so I wasn't actually able to go to the park and do field research for maybe a year or two or so, which was fine. I have so many memories of being in the park, and there's so much on Central Park on the internet and there were books, so it was easy to write. And then when I started to go and do field research to add to my manuscript, it was just so much fun, and I couldn't believe I was actually getting to do that.
That's so cool. I love that. This story touches on themes of mistrust between species, particularly between humans and animals. What message were you hoping to convey through the interactions between Olaf and the humans?
Olaf, he has good reasons to mistrust humans. His mother was killed when he was a cub, and he witnesses humans fighting. In the story, it's an alternate version of New York City, so there's even more than our real world social upheaval and chaos. But I also wanted to balance it. I have the kind zookeeper who took care of him. He still thinks about her, and later in the story, he searches for her. And the very, very completely good witch sister Helga, she is kind to everyone, humans and animals. And so I wanted to balance that out, and even show that even the villains, they're not really trying to be bad. They have what they feel are worthy goals, and they sometimes lose sight of the right way to achieve those goals.
Yeah.
I was just trying to put up questions about how humans act in the world that isn't always kind or even smart, but to temper that with understanding and compassion.
Absolutely. I think you did a beautiful job with that. That's really cool. That's very beautiful. Well, we kind of already talked about Central Park, but let's talk about the setting. Central Park at night is an intriguing setting for the events of this story. Why did you choose this location, and how does it enhance the narrative for you?
That first image I received of them standing in the tundra, I've never lived in a tundra. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I could do adequate research to portray that in an effective, authentic way. I did actually at first wonder if I should maybe set the story in medieval times, because I knew I couldn't have Olaf stealing the baby from the actual parents. Yeah. So I had this idea maybe these medieval serfs will be forced to give up their baby to the evil king and queen who couldn't naturally have their own child. But I just felt like I haven't actually read a whole lot of medieval fantasy or seen that many TV shows and films, so I felt like that would be a ton of research, and I was more interested in writing than in doing research, so I figured the ratio would be better if I set it in modern times.
Absolutely.
And because I'm a New Yorker, New York seemed the most obvious choice for setting, and then I thought that a bear would eventually find its way to the park if it was in New York City.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was just in New York City recently, last year, 2 years ago, I guess, and I went through the park, and so it was fun to like visualize the park since I've actually been there in person, and that was really cool. You did a beautiful job of explaining, the park, and I thought that was amazing.
Thank you. And it's like you said, at nighttime, the park actually closes from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Oh,
but yeah, but I mean, even though it's much safer now than it is in the story, or that it was when I was growing up as a child in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't want to be in the park alone at night.
Yeah, no.
Any time of night. No.
Yeah.
But it, also the nighttime, it adds like a certain beauty with the moon, the moonlight and the stars.
Yeah. Perfect blend of like eerie and the pretty.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a nice contrast there. And also it helps to understand how a bear has been able to roam around Central Park and not be noticed for many years.
Let's go ahead and talk about the character relationships. The relationship between Olaf and Essex is central to the story. How did you develop their dynamic, and what do they represent in the broader context of the narrative?
So I was probably, to some extent, influenced by that old Disney animated film Robin Hood, with the fox Robin Hood and Little John as a bear. Mm-hmm. I didn't rewatch the movie as I was writing, but I definitely had that in mind. And I think in the buddy aspect of it, and I think in a lot of buddy films and books that have that dynamic, often the smaller being is the smart one, the brains, and the larger being is the brawn. And I think for me, what they represented was Olaf. He doesn't think he's very smart, and he's basically told by others that he's not smart, and he believes that. I think he is intelligent. He just thinks in a different way than others do, but he mostly comes through life through his heart. And Essex, she is a very caring being, but she's in her head a lot. She's very analytical. And I felt like I was trying to bring about both sides, that we need, to make smart choices in life. We need our mind to work for us. But we also need to listen to our heart, because our heart usually knows a little bit better what's going on. So there's a balance there. So I thought as a team, Olaf and Essex, they make a good team. Like they had an argument about the midsection of the book where they break apart for a while, but then they come back together. And I think that is symbolic of the mind and the heart working together.
Absolutely. That's really beautiful. I love that. And you're right. There are so many characters in different books and movies and stuff that have that balance. And so it's fun to, still see that, and because it's true in real life too. Sometimes that's even with relationships. In fact, my husband and I are kind of like that. Let's talk about the humor and the dark elements. This book mixes dark themes such as kidnapping and distrust with humor, especially in the interactions between Harvey and Mabel. How did you strike the balance between these tones, and what role does humor play in the story?
Well, I think I tend to infuse humor into most things I do. I don't think I could write a story if I couldn't get to be funny during it. But there are important themes and dark elements to the story. And I thought right from the outset to establish a tone where, you have this bear hiding behind a tree, worrying about, or is his tail sticking out, or the witches are, thinking about, people say that they can like just look at you and make your toes fall off. And so I have already started to infuse humor into a situation where, okay, this is kind of, these humans with a little baby flying on a broomstick into the park, what's going on. And then we switch to Harvey's point of view, and he's kind of caught in the middle of wanting to help his wife get their magical community to be protected and not be harassed by the police, but he disagrees with how they're going about it. So he's thinking these things that are grave concerns, but he's also thinking about how much he doesn't like his wife. So there's that, all the cartoons in the world about with husbands and wives bickering, and so I had that element there. So I think right from the start, I established this tone of this is going to be a funny story, but we're going to talk about some important things too. And I think it's important. Humor story, if there's especially when there are dark elements. So if it was just darkness and sorrow, it wouldn't be something you'd want to keep slogging through. And the humor, I think, also helps you empathize with the characters more.
Absolutely. And just like in real life, we're all complex like that, right? I personally love a little bit of dark humor, so I appreciated that. Let's talk about the human versus animal perspective. This story is told from both human and animal perspectives. What challenges did you face in writing these different viewpoints, and how did you ensure each felt authentic?
I didn't actually feel that it was challenging. I felt I did enough research on the animals so that when I was writing them, I totally felt like I was them. Like I hear the characters in my head, so I can hear their different voices, and it just felt very natural. And ever since I started writing, I think I started writing screenplays really, and with the different scenes, you don't normally write to each character's point of view, so that felt very natural to me. There's only one time I remember that I wrote something that didn't feel right. I wrote in the middle of the story the animals and the good witches. They're at this new hideout, the castle in the park, Belvedere Castle, and I wrote that the windows have been smashed. So the grumpy witch sister, she's thinking about how there's no privacy. She'd have to be careful when picking her nose. And that made me laugh. And I kept the joke in there, even though I felt kind of uneasy about it. Mm-hmm. And then I think I already knew I needed to take it out, but I left it in there for a while. And then my writing buddy was reading it and saying, yeah, I laughed at that, but Hilda wouldn't care. She would pick her nose no matter who was there or what. So I was like, yeah, I have to take that out, don't I?
That's so funny. I love that. Oh my goodness. So you said you have their voices in your head. Do you have you can just totally hear each character in your head? Like, do you do that? Do you have your own animals at home?
I have a cat. Yes.
You have a cat. Do you kind of narrate your cat's thoughts? Like, can you hear your cat's voice too, type of a thing?
I have had some cartoon ideas for writing us interacting. So I guess when I've had those ideas, yes, I have heard her voice saying things to me like, it's 4 a.m., get up, what are you doing, still in bed? Yeah. But in general, when I interact with her, I use, I'm one of those humans that uses the very high
Oh, yes.
voice people
Where
use
your
for
octaves
children
go
and
up
adults.
10.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, we have a couple of dogs at home and we definitely narrate their thoughts. Like one dog is a poodle mix, and if he's wanting something, we'll be like, "Oh, Dad, please." We like come up with a character voice. So I connected with that when you said that you heard their voice, because I definitely like hear animal voices in my head all the time. Characters like Maple and Harvey are portrayed with moral ambiguity, especially in their interactions with the baby. What were you trying to explore about the human nature and morality through these characters?
So I believe that humans, most of us, come into the world very open. It's really only interactions with adults who have also had the same thing happen to them that we're all downloading these negative beliefs about how we need to be afraid of others, and that we need to make sure our needs and interests are met, even if we're not really thinking of how that might affect others. There's a point where Essex the fox, she's thinking about the baby, and their friend, a cat, has this conception that all humans are garbage, and the fox is thinking about how humans can't be garbage because they were all innocent, pure little babies once, just like the baby that they have now, and that they're taught to act in garbagey ways over a long period of time. So I think I was trying to show, especially with Mabel and Harvey, that they also have doubts about what they're doing sometimes and have impulses to do the right thing. And I also try to, there's a spiritual element to the story. Of course, I don't know what happens after we die, but I think reincarnation is a very likely candidate. And I'm trying to show that I think that the opportunities to do the right thing are endless.
I love that. So they're not just bad and like trying to do these things. They're more complex, and they have, you know, all the, I don't know, is this right? I don't know, this feels right, but also this is all I know type of a thing. So
right, yeah, that like I feel in my heart that I'm doing something wrong, but my mind is kind of overriding it and saying that this is a path we have to take.
Just because of the things they've learned
There's
in life
a lot
and
of
what they
inner
know.
conflict.
Yeah, inner conflict for sure.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool that you're able to put that in the different characters, and they weren't just evil and just trying to take this kid, and there's reasons behind it.
I don't even think it would be a believable story if I made them like these cartoony villains. No one would kind of, I think people would empathize or relate to that.
The ending suggests unresolved tension and ongoing conflict. Do you have plans for a sequel or further explorations of these characters and their world? And if so, what can readers expect?
So I'm about 80 pages into a sequel. Lately getting ready to launch the first book has gotten really intense, so I haven't had time to write any further, but I have been jotting down ideas as they come to me. And it seems like Helga, the Good Witch, is going to be a main character this time around. The animals will still be present, but there will be some more adults involved, some old characters and some new. And I'm also trying to pull in some new kid characters in this one. It may even be partly set at a school. Not just a magic school, but yeah, we'll see.
Very cool. That's very exciting. I'm sure the process of, just thinking throughout the day of like, oh, maybe this, maybe that. And you probably want to just sit down and write sometimes with all the thoughts that come.
Yeah, sometimes I'm just like, I can't wait till all this intense promotional and getting ready to launch stuff is over so that I can write. But then sometimes I'm frightened by the prospect of writing when I know some people outline extensively, but I'm more of a pantser. And in the beginning, it's a little overwhelming when you're thinking, like, I have no idea where the story's going. So there's an element of fear involved there.
For sure. I can imagine that be inner conflict. Oh, man.
Like, let me get going and let me not do this.
Yes, for sure. Because we are complex and that's what we want to do. So what type of readers and people is this book written for? And what do you hope readers gain from reading this book?
It's categorized as a middle grade novel, but I was really writing it for anyone who enjoys laughing while they read and who also enjoys reading about important social and but also inner concerns. And hopefully that they don't mind if it's written in a kind of quirky, unusual way. And I'm hoping that readers will, from reading the story, with a renewed sense of compassion, understanding for others, and not being so quick to judge others or make assumptions about what others are thinking or intending by their actions, and just understanding that people are complex and you really just have no idea what's going on for them, that they're choosing to act in ways that aren't optimal for society.
Yeah, they're complex, and the different circumstances that they're a part of or that they've been subjected to. That's pretty wonderful. That's very exciting. Well, it's been so fun learning about the details of this book behind the scenes and how you got to where the book ended up to be today. And I'm so excited for all of our readers to go and read this. So tell us, when does this book come out and where can you find it, and any other details you want to give us?
Thank you. It's coming out October 15th. You can find it online at the usual suspects, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, perhaps a few other places. My local bookstore, Taylor & Co. in Brooklyn, will also be stocking it and hosting a reading and a signing on October 15th.
Okay, how cool.
And thank you. And hopefully a few other local bookstores as well. And readers can find more information on my website, patticalkosz.com.
Okay, and will it be available on Kindle?
Yes.
On Kindle as well. Okay, and will there be an audiobook eventually?
I hope so.
That'd be so cool. It'd be fun to hear all the different characters come to life audio. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. So, well, is there anything else you wanted to say or do with this interview, Patti?
I engaged the services of this wildly talented illustrator. Her name's Xiao. She's based in the UK, and I figured that if I'm going to self-publish, then I'm going to put my work out in the way that I want it to be. So there are about 50 illustrations in the book. And when I told my writing buddy, she was like, "That's a lot." And I'm like, "Yeah, but since I'm putting it out there, I can do that." And so there's very fun and wonderful illustrations to be had in the book.
Yes, as I was reading through the book, I have an 8-year-old son, and he looked over at my Kindle. He's like, "What are you reading?" And I was like, "It's this book about this bear." And he looks through the pictures, and he's like poking through the page. I'm like, "You're losing my spot," but he's just looking through all the different drawings and stuff. He really enjoyed looking at all that, as I did as well.
Yes. I want to thank you so much, Brandi, for having me on. It's such a pleasure. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. We're so excited about this book. I can't wait to talk more about it here to our viewers. And I just wish you all the success, and I hope everything goes well for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you for writing such a beautiful story. That was a really amazing story. And I can't wait for other installments.
Thank you so much.
If you're wondering what to take away from Olaf and Essex, it's this. Whether it's a bear learning to care for a human baby or a fox seeking wisdom from the trees, the story reminds us that courage and compassion come in all shapes and sizes. It's a tale that is enchanting as it is thought-provoking. Before we go, we do have 2 other segments to go over still. First, we have Dragon's Roar. In today's Dragon's Roar, we are delving into the latest drama or news in the book industry. This week was an exciting week for us Danielle L. Jensen fans. We got a sneak peek of the cover and got to find out a release date for A Curse Carved in Bone, which is the second book in the saga of The Unfated by Danielle L. Jensen. It will be released May 13th, 2025, and I cannot wait. The cover art is so beautiful. Freya looks so strong and fierce. I cannot wait for May 13th, 2025. Next, we have the Sorcerer Scrolls, where we look at some forthcoming fables and quests you can embark on soon. Today's highlight will be The Last Witch in Edinburgh by Marielle Thompson. This is a captivating fantasy novel that blends elements of Scottish folklore, witchcraft, and queer romance. Set in alternate 1824 Edinburgh, this book explores the tension and danger surrounding women accused of witchcraft in a society that fears their power. While specific reviews for this book might still be emerging given its recent release, it is anticipated to resonate well with readers who enjoy the feminist fantasy, historical fiction, and stories with strong, complex female characters. If you're interested in tales of witches, historical settings, and a compelling queer romance, The Last Witch in Edinburgh promises to be a gripping read. For more details on how to purchase the book, you can check out listings on major bookseller websites, and it will be released August 20th of this year. That's all for today's episode of Dragons and Spaceships. Thank you for joining on this journey through the realms and the starships. I hope you enjoyed this episode and our interview with the author. If you were intrigued by this book, don't forget to grab your own copy of Olaf and Essex. I highly recommend diving into the full book. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to find us on social media for more quick and engaging book reviews and recommendations. Until next time, happy reading, stay curious, and keep exploring the fantastical and futuristic. And may your TBR pile never stop growing.